Hello, and welcome to another edition of SRE's Sunday New York Times Read-Along. Our guest this week is Erin Morrison, national writer on race and ethnicity for the Associated Press. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer and guest host of the New York Times Read-Along. I'm also the vice president of events and communications at Digimentors. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We're also live on our Digimentors website. Thank you, Erin, for letting us go live directly to your Twitter account. We are looking forward to a great show today. As always, we want to let you know, make sure you know to share this post, to like, to comment, to reply to the tweet, to mention your friends. Let's get as many people watching as possible. Again, my name is Neil Parekh. I'm sitting in for Sri Srinivasan today. We are so thrilled to have Erin Morrison with us for today's show. Before we jump in to welcome our guest, I want to do a quick recap. It's still January, so we can still do recaps of 2021. We had a great number of guests that joined us last year. Let's take a look. And of course, our guest today is Erin Morrison, national writer for race and ethnicity for the Associated Press. Let's go ahead and welcome some of the folks watching today. We have a number of people who have checked in. Jonathan Borstein from a slightly frozen East Village. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us. Diane Stefani, good morning as well, checking in from Margate, New Jersey. She's trying to type. I guess her fingers might be cold up in the Northeast. Doug Levy is joining us from the pre-dawn darkness. Again, one of our regulars who watch at 5:30 a.m. Eastern time. I still can't believe it. I know he says it's normal for him, but we always appreciate folks that wake up extra early. 8:30 a.m. is early enough for some folks. Shout out to Stephen Kaplan. He's saying hi to the New York Times Read-Along family. Hope everyone is staying warm. And yes, it is cold. I went out to get the paper from our driveway. It was 17 degrees this morning here, just outside Washington, D.C. Another friend and neighbor, so to speak, Rodney Hollifer from Silver Spring, Maryland, not so far from where I am. We're waiting Snowmageddon, 14 flakes of snow, as you call it, in D.C. In the DMV area, that counts as a blizzard. But yes, we're getting snow, at least over here around 1 o'clock. It'll shift to ice at some point. And they've already said we might be having a virtual school day on Tuesday, at least in Fairfax County. Bob Veritoni joining us from New Milford, New Jersey. Ellen Austin from the Upper East Side. And yes, still January. Patricia Freudenberg watching on LinkedIn, saying hi from New York. Eve Botello from snowy Charlotte. So the snow is already starting down south. And Freddy, I like the music on the opening. That's great. And my mom is saying hi from Tampa. She's in Tampa for the winter. Hi, Mom. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Always appreciate you watching. Paula Kiger, one of our producers, is actually checking in from South Carolina. She is traveling. She was visiting family. Paula, thank you so much for your dedication and for logging in from the hotel to make sure we can keep the show running on all cylinders. Naomi Service is watching. It's all about layers on the Upper West Side. Absolutely, absolutely. And her new pup, Janice Joplin, interesting name. Miriam Berkeley watching from Hell's Kitchen. Miriam, thank you so much for being a loyal watcher. We have a great show planned, as I mentioned. We have Aaron Morrison joining us from the AP, and we'll also be talking about the 52 Places special edition in the New York Times today, their annual list of 52 places to go, 52 places we love last year. This year, it's effectively 52 places where you can make a difference. So we will definitely want to dig into that. Before we do that, I want to give a quick review of the Twitter thread that we put together to give you a sense of what we'll be covering in today's show. So let's bring that up real quickly. Of course, we start off with the promo for the show. The second tweet gives you an overview of the various issues. An interview that Aaron did with Nicole Hanna Jones, and then a piece they did on racism in the U.S. Military academies, part of a year-long series. He also did a piece on the Tulsa Massacre 100 years later, on the 100th anniversary. And of course, this is a promo for the 52 Places section where travelers can be part of the difference. So when we dig in a little bit, again, we have a link to Aaron's website, some really great information, background information about him. This interview with Nicole Hanna Jones on her year with the 1619 Project, her, the turmoil of not getting tenure at her alma mater at UNC. And if you click on the tweet, there's a video interview that Aaron did with Nicole, which is definitely worth watching. As part of the 1619 Project, we want to give a shout out to Walter Grayson and Kay Whitehead. We did a great show with them at the end of November, focusing on the 1619 Project and critical race theory. And that really built on this show, one of the most powerful shows we've ever done, with Sonny Slaughter, when the 1619 Project came out. It was really a special event. And I got to go to her house. This is, of course, in August of 2019. We'll ask Aaron about the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting, which is founded by Nicole Hanna Jones, Ron Nixon, and Topher Sanders. This is the piece by Aaron on the U.S. military academies. Again, there's a video that was part of the piece. James Laporta shared that, so you can grab that really easily. Aaron also wrote about Louisiana and the impact on marginalized folks. More than almost a fifth of Louisiana's population lives below the poverty line, mostly Black and women. And I know that my former colleagues at United Way, United Way Southeast Louisiana, and in Baton Rouge, Capital Area United Way Southwest Louisiana, and others are really working to help folks down there. This is the piece on the Tulsa Massacre. I also included a link to the New York Times, really incredible piece that they did. You see the front page of the paper, and if you click through, there is a really great interactive component. We included the video, the interview we did. John Branch was our guest that week, so you can watch how Sri talked about that special piece that day. This is a really important piece that Aaron wrote about how the race war was evident long before the Capitol siege. It's certainly powerful. It's worth sharing the lead. A war rages on in America, and it didn't begin with Donald Trump or the assault on the Capitol. It started with slavery and never ended. Through lynchings and voter suppression, the snarling attack dogs of Bull Connor, and the insidious accounting of redlining. Today's battles in the race war are waged by legions of white people in the thrall of stereotypes, lies, and conspiracy theories that don't just exist for recluses on some dark corner of the internet. And our friends at the Southern Poverty Law Center were quoted in the story. We included their tweet. We were thrilled to produce their 50th anniversary celebration last year. This is a little bit about Aaron's course that he wrote at the CUNY J School, the Newmark Journalism School. So we'll hopefully get to that as well. And then, of course, the 52 places, which we'll cover in depth. This is the cover and this graphic we saw earlier. And this is one example of one of their destinations. If you go to our website, you can find the full PDF of the 52 places, thanks to the New York Times. Shout out to Wayne Camadoy for all the help he's given. We also include the show we did with Elizabeth Goodrich, the deputy editor. In 2021, we did their 52 Places We Love as a special show. And then Amy Vershup had me over at her place in 2020, just before the pandemic hit, 2 months before, for the release of the 52 Places to Go. And Seb Modak was also there. He was the 52 Places Traveler for 2019, a huge highlight. Then we have a little promo for Digimentors, our consulting company that Sri started. We can make that graphic a little bit bigger for you. Digimentors focuses on social and digital consulting, virtual event production, hybrid event production, amplification, talk shows, podcasts. If you're interested in having us work with you on an event, please reach out to us. You can reach us at Sri@digimentors.group or Neil@digimentors.group, and we would love to work with you on an event. We also have, I want to give a shout out to our production team. In addition to Sri and myself, Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, and Carla Baranakis. They are integral to the success of our show every week. So thank you very much for that. And the last thing I want to point out to folks, just so you know, so you're aware, is that we have a Twitter list of all of the guests that have been on our show. So you want to check that out. We have about 136 guests that are in that Twitter list. So thank you very much for that quick run through of what we can expect today. And what we want to do now is turn to the paper really quickly, do a quick review of the front page sections, and then we'll bring on Aaron Morrison. So we'll go ahead and bring the paper on. And we have the New York Times camera. So as you see here on the front page, the lead story is on Democrats facing costly new slog on voting curves. But the display, the enterprise story, is about decades of discovery before miraculous sprint to a vaccine.
That's a really in-depth piece on the process of getting a vaccine. Below the fold, a promo, the 52 places, with that photograph right there, an article about Putin, Russia, and Ukraine. Terrible story. It's just under the fold. You see the top of the headline: "Woman killed after shove in the subway." This is an Asian American woman. It's not clear if it was motivated by race. One can make assumptions about that, especially with all the hatred against Asian Americans over the last year and a half over COVID. The other story on the front page is on the Novak Djokovic story in Australia. Here's a 52 places section. We'll certainly get to that later and spend some time with that. We always like taking a look at the advertising, the insert. This is a special 4-page insert for Putney student travel, which certainly is impressive and it gets a lot of visibility doing it this way, almost like it's on its own section. We have, what else do we have here? We have the Sunday review section, and we have when caregivers can't take it anymore. This is after a spate of deaths. A group of healthcare workers in Oregon decided to save lives that needed a union. I actually worked with SEIU 775 in Washington State, long-term caregivers, nursing home workers, and home care workers. They are salt of the earth. They do a lot. This was an effort to unionize a memory care facility in Oregon. And definitely worth reading to understand what they were going through there. Arts and leisure, missing in action. After a life-changing injury from a table saw blade, the sculptor John Powers asked friends to help design creative solutions. That is interesting. The business cover CEOs were our heroes, at least according to them. What a great flip, right? From the top of the fold underneath. They stepped up in the pandemic to save the world, says Mark Benioff of Salesforce, even as their tax practices and purchase kept them above its troubles. And then there are articles about crypto enthusiasts meet their match, angry gamers. And this is about NFTs. Game publishers offer NFTs, but players say it's money-making scheme. Sunday Styles, Marianne Williamson. Remember her? She ran for president. She moved to Washington, D.C. after the 2020 campaign and continues to think big. The outsider still wants in. Arts and leisure is an Oscar special. So Oscar buzz. And this focus, is, the cover is on Penelope Cruz. So you'll want to take a look at that. The magazine, I'm hoping this is suitable for work. It's a family-friendly show, The Joys and Challenges of Sex After 70. If you've read the article, let me know. Let me know what you thought. And then finally, the book review, Criminal Injustice, the cover, Just Pursuit, a Black prosecutor's fight for fairness and the rage of innocence, how America criminalizes Black youth, by Kristen Henning. Kristen Henning, this book is actually, Kristen Henning did a event for Justice Aid back in the fall, a book talk. And I'm proud to be on the board for Justice Aid. So definitely want to check out that book review. So with that quick review of the paper, we're going to bring on Aaron Morrison and start our conversation with the national writer on race and ethnicity for the Associated Press. Aaron,
hey,
thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. As you saw, you are following in the footsteps of some great guests that we've had in 2021. And we are thrilled that you're joining us. To have someone of your stature, working with the AP, covering these nationwide stories on issues that are very important to us, on race and ethnicity, important for everyone. We appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday morning to join us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So I wanted to first ask you, as we do all our guests, what was the last year and a half like, almost 2 years now, under COVID? How have you fared? We're hoping health was good at family and friends. But let us know what it was like for you.
I always sort of mark the start of the pandemic with my start full time at the Associated Press. So I started March 2nd, 2020. And, I'm based in New York City. And so I come into the AP headquarters in New York. And, I'm there for all of maybe a week and a half before everything shuts down. So, the vast majority of my time at the AP has been doing remote work, except, of course, when I'm on assignment out traveling and reporting in the field. So, the last couple of years was just filled with lots of reporting on COVID, lots of reporting on racial injustice. Of course, as we all know, after the murder of George Floyd. That was a huge story for me on my beat, and then I went, had a little downtime in the summer a little bit and injured my ankle, so I was sidelined for about 6 or 7 weeks. Thankfully, did not need surgery, but yeah, I mean the last couple of years have just it seems like a blur, but so much has been you know. Accomplished, packed into that time. I feel like I've become a better journalist, a better writer, and probably have more empathy, now in my life than I've ever had, given how much suffering and pain and harm I've seen people experience in the last couple of years. So for me, it's been overall good, but certainly challenging.
Empathy is certainly an important attribute for a writer, particularly when you're covering issues that are so sensitive, race and ethnicity. Want to acknowledge for folks and apologize. We had a few sound issues in that opening. Hopefully the sound quality is better now in terms of the adjustment. So let me know. Keep me posted both in the comments, and also Paula will let us know in the production room how things are going. So Aaron, in terms of the work you've done, I gave a little preview when we went over the Twitter thread, and hopefully folks will share that and retweet it. But I want to jump in to some of the pieces that you've written, particularly starting with the most recent one that we want to highlight: your interview with Nicole Hanna Jones and her warning on democracy. As viewers will note, she really led the development of the 1619 project. It's evolved into a book, a children's book. There's a documentary coming out as well. Um, what was, with the year that she's had dealing with the tenure issues at UNC, moving to Howard, et cetera, um, what was your takeaway from your conversation with her? What is she trying to tell us?
I think, well, I think she's trying to tell us a lot of things, but if I was to take away one big message that I hear consistently from Nicole, but I certainly heard that in the interview, was never doubt your convictions, and I say that because there were many times, I think, and she probably would even say this, that she could have just decided to walk away from the controversy and keep a lower profile and just keep her head down and do since the 1619 project had come out, she could have just did the mic drop thing and then just moved on and continued to do the other work and the other amazing things that she's involved in. But she kept at it. I mean, if you see her Twitter feed, she almost daily is responding to people and responding to the people challenging her audacity to even put out the 1619 project. So I think the big message was don't be afraid to bet on yourself, and if you feel, especially as a journalist, when you feel you're on solid ground to make the claims and or present the argument or narrative that you are presenting. You can't get cold feet when it's go time. And I think what I heard from her is that doing the work that she's doing takes a lot of courage, but also conviction that you truly believe that ultimately, amid the threats, amid the having your name dragged through the mud, that it's ultimately going to be for the better, greater good. So that's what I took away from the interview. But she also made some really interesting analysis around our democracy and where we're headed as a result of the reaction to not just the 1619 Project, but also how we are dealing with the idea of protecting the right to vote in this country.
Sure. And certainly in terms of her profile over the course of the year, I mean, since really actually before it was August 2019 that it came out, so it's 2+ years now.
Mhm.
In terms of the getting the interview with her, what was that process like? Was that something that you were working on for a while? Did you plan to do an end of the year recap, or did it just come together quickly?
Yeah, I mean the AP has is trying to brand, and not trying to. I think we've successfully branded what we are now calling the AP interview. So, all of us, whether we work on on a specific beat, or if we are covering general news in a region of the world, we are encouraged to find big names, approach them, and ask for a sit down interview. A wide-ranging interview where we can touch on not just the reason why that person has been in the news, but also on a number of things that will help our audience, our readers, get to know that person better, get to know what drives them, motivates them. And so, Nicole agreed to sit down with us in December for an AP interview, and it worked well because the both of the books, the 1619 Project book and the children's book, had come out. It'd been on the New York Times bestseller list, atop the bestseller list for consecutive weeks. So this is a way to sort of tie up Nicole's year in a story form and show that she began the year in the dispute with UNC, her alma mater, and ended it atop the New York Times bestseller list. And this is despite the controversy over the 1619 Project and all the pushback that she's experienced over it.
That's not a bad arc for the year
I would say so. Yeah.
right. And I will say that with the experience she had over tenure at UNC, to be able to walk away from that, not just the position, but her alma mater as well, and to go to Howard, it was just incredible, just an incredible move. I believe that would really show. I mean, she just really stepped up with that, and it was great to see her land
Absolutely.
really well.
One of the things she said to me in not the December interview, but I actually interviewed her the day after she made the decision to go to Howard. And one thing that stuck with me from that interview, she said the moment taught her that it's okay to go home and build our own.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of sort of being expected to beg UNC for tenure, she decided to take her talents, to somewhere where she felt she could have the most impact. A lot of people have applauded her for that.
Sure. I want to give a few more shout outs to folks who are watching. Mary Curtis, another one of our regulars and a former guest on the show as well. She's a CQ roll call columnist and host of Equal Time with Mary C. Curtis. She was also the MC for our event that we produced for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And she came up for the concert, the Justice Aid event that we had last fall. So Mary, thank you for joining us. We also have, who else is joining us? Scrolling down, Francesca Burks from Ardsley, New York, is joining. Joan Detz, joining from Center City, Philadelphia. And we have a few others. Patricia has a question. When you do the interview, do you also improvise questions besides the planned Q&A? What is that? How much work goes into, I mean, particularly this, the AP interview, the one at the end of the year? and how much is off the cuff and kind of in the moment?
I certainly prepared questions because you never want to go into that, into an interview like that, sort of rambling through and sort of getting to a question eventually I tend to do that sometimes with like a long preamble and then asking the question. But that's more in conversation. That's more when I know the interview isn't going to be viewed in its entirety by an audience. But I prepared questions, but then there were moments where she said something and I was like, oh, I want to, push a little more on that or hear a little bit more about that. So certainly, allowed room for myself to be a little bit nimble in the questions the follow up rather, or redirect.
Exactly. And Patricia said she's going to borrow the line you shared earlier. Don't be afraid to bet on yourself. Inspirational, which I think is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and talk about another one of your stories. This one about racism in the military academies. This was part of a series of articles that the AP put out on racism in the military. This one focused on military academies specifically. What was the key point from that article?
Well,
aside from that, it exists, of course.
Yeah. I mean, it's no secret that our U.S. Armed Forces for a very long time have dealt with race in many different ways. Folks in the in the military community and culture, and certainly those who have been with those institutions for a long time. They'll say the military actually pioneered in desegregation at a time where when soldiers went home, they were not going to be integrated, in public accommodations. They couldn't sit at the same lunch counters and ride in the same sections of the bus. However, in the military, they determined that unit cohesion and the success of the mission and the success and the power of the military was better when they didn't separate whites and blacks. So, we think about that history in the context of, of our military academies and how these institutions are really the premier schools preparing leadership of our armed forces, and how diversity there impacts diversity on the other end. When we talk about our commanders and our generals and the folks who rise up to lead, and there are lots of Black and brown and Asian and otherwise, folks who have said, I went through the academies. I'm proud of, being an academy graduate, but during my time there, I did face microaggressions. I did feel like I wasn't quite welcomed. And some will say that I faced blatant racism. So, the story really set out to show and track how have the military academies dealt with its mission, its stated desire really to increase diversity, to bring in more diverse student classes. A quick thing that I'll say about this: when I was an intern at the Associated Press in Baltimore in 2009, one of the stories they sent me on was the U.S. Naval Academy and was welcoming its most diverse class ever. That was the story in 2009. And so when I look at the number, the percentage of Black and brown, midshipmen is what they're called, or plebes that were coming into the Naval Academy, that percentage didn't budge after I did an analysis of data that I requested from the military academy. So this idea that, they are trying, but haven't quite done enough to welcome in a more diverse group of plebes. And I should also say that the graduation rates also for Black attendees of the Naval Academy also hasn't budged much since 2009. So it was just really interesting to sort of take a deep dive and look at the numbers, but also the reasons behind that, and to talk to folks who've been there. And again, these are folks who said they are very proud of being graduates of the military academy, and feel that it did a good thing for their personal lives, but also for their professional lives. Whether or not they went on to long careers in the military, still, I mean, you can go to a military academy and have to pass by a photograph of Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general. So that speaks to the environment, the climate, the culture that students of color experience.
You have the Lee barracks. You have if I remember correctly, there was the only image or statue of a black man on campus
was in the Lee, in the portrait of Lee, it was a slave kneeling next to Robert E. Lee. So
it's incredible.
At
West Point, no less.
At West Point, we have a former recruiter for West Point saying, imagine how hard it is, difficult it is to recruit Black students if they can just Google and find, oh, there's Robert E. Lee, sort of pictured in a prominent place on campus.
Some great photographs accompanying the story as well. Some great portraits. And then some really good data as well. I mean, you have this, you talked about the graduation rates. This is might be a little small for folks to see on screen. We'll see if we can bump that up. There we go. That's a little bit better.
Yeah.
You can see the, fewer than 2/3 of the Coast Guard's Black cadets graduated. This is the data you were talking about.
Yes.
I assume.
Yes, absolutely.
So there may be a diverse class, but they're not making it to the end. There are a number of factors why they wouldn't make it, but certainly the way they're treated on campus plays a huge role in that.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're very few chances today where you are the only Black cadet on your campus or in a military academy, whereas that might have been true 30 or 40 years ago. But even now, not having folks who look like you either in the faculty or represented in a good way in the student body, of course that affects your ability to feel like, can I do this? Can I stick out all 4 years? Is this something I really can do? And some folks do burn out. I mean, that's true for all colleges, but
it'd be interesting to see that kind of data, at other colleges that are touting their diversity. What kind of support do they have in place? How are they helping people get to the finish line?
Right.
Whether they are. Manoj Kumar says, thank you for the insight. It's a great example of going, beyond the surface level data, the statements you might be getting. And earlier, Miriam said the photo said it all in terms of diversity. Whether you're talking about, this great photo, just a beautiful photograph, and then the photograph at the top as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the graduation rates, rise for most, but then this is the one in terms of how Black cadets do. So just some great photographs, a great story, and just powerful. And this is junior ROTC instructor poses for a photo in Florida. One of the folks that talked to you for the.
And his story, I would encourage folks to, if you haven't had a chance, go and check that story out. But also, it's a video done by my colleague Noreen Nasir. In particular, that junior ROTC instructor, talked about how heartbreaking it was for him to see sort of racism and racist ideas expressed by the high school students that he was, teaching, which again goes to the idea of culture and how military academies like the branches of the military themselves, how they are screening for and rooting out those type of ideas so that they don't become a larger issue on the other end when we're talking about our leadership.
Sure. Our colleague Rose Horowitz is watching. She's joining from Connecticut. She's excited to hear a top AP writer. She started her career at the AP, and gives a shout out. The organization does great work and is so important to journalism. We also have Julia Weeks, who is on our production team. She works with AP Images, and has been great, a great advocate for AP, and really we love obviously the work that you do. Let's take a look at another story. This one about Tulsa, and 100 years after the massacre. This is again, folks are hopefully are familiar with this story now, but in 1921, there was something called Black Wall Street in Greenwood, Oklahoma, and in after a riot, and just brutal attacks, violence, fires, it was effectively wiped out. And it's something that started coming back to light. People obviously knew about locally, but it got a lot of national attention last year, particularly in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and the reawakening, the reassessment of race relations. So in terms of the timing, if that had happened a year before, I wonder what that anniversary would have been like. But coming after George Floyd, et cetera, it was a very different piece. What was it like for you to dig into this story? How long, for example, you knew the anniversary was coming up. How long were you working on this piece in advance of the anniversary?
So, I worked with a team of AP writers and editors to come up with a package that really looked at not just retelling the story of the Tulsa Race Massacre, but also dealing with the repercussions of many of the victims, descendants of the victims of the Tulsa Race Massacre, certainly saying that they've never truly received any sort of restitution or reparations for what they experienced, and that what took place, 100 years ago there, the echoes of it are still in that community. When you look at where people are situated, where the predominantly Black part of Tulsa exists, is not as developed, and lacks some of the things that you might see in other parts of Tulsa, Oklahoma, grocery stores and restaurants and things that really make a community vibrant and provide jobs to the community. So there was one task of making sure we retold what happened there, but then it was another to make sure people understood that there are still people living with the repercussions of what took place 100 years, especially because there was never any meaningful justice around making the folks whole again, making those communities whole again.
And these interviews with family members and showing the photographs, this was very poignant. This photo is of a survivor of the massacre, Ernestine Alpha Gibbs, holding one of her grandchildren, and high school and college diplomas of her high school and college diplomas. It's very real. It's not something that's certainly buried. And this is a shot of at the time, an African American woman and a girl sitting on a porch swing. People don't realize how much wealth was actually concentrated in that area. This is they called it Little Africa on fire, Tulsa race riot, June 1st.
Yep. Yeah, it's I think what is most shocking really should be shocking to anyone, but that people can can live in a country where they're told, you've got a right to liberty and freedom and justice, and the ability to self-determine. But when that is challenged, when those things are sort of ripped away from a community, and then on the other end of it, there's no justice, no repayment, no reparations. It really sort of you start to question what those principles even mean in that context. If you can see what happened to Tulsa, and then 100 years later, there's no reparation or justice for that harm, for that trauma, for that atrocity. Yeah, I mean, how could you really truly believe in the principles that are enshrined in our Constitution, that are supposed to make things like this a once in a lifetime event? And what we know is that there was more than one Tulsa race massacre. These things happen in other places around the country, and similarly did not receive the attention or justice that the folks deserved.
And I think that is, I think, one of the challenges that really is brought up by the 1619 Project and the work that Nicole Hanna Jones has done. The legacy of these attacks, the legacy of this treatment over time. It's not a historical event that is over and done, right? You talk about, I mean, they talk about one family that owned a printing press in Tulsa, and that you write about, how they lost everything burned in the fire except for the actual metal plates, right, of the press. Imagine what could have happened if that business, if that effort could have survived, could have thrived. That could have been that family could have been a equivalent to the Murdochs. Could have been a media mogul. They compared themselves to Robert Johnson of BET.
Right.
I mean, that just to imagine the opportunities lost with all that. Beyond just, I mean, it carries everywhere. When you look at redlining and housing and the distribution of wealth and generational wealth, it started back in the 50s. That's where we are, why we are where we are today, because of policies that took place, decades ago.
Which is, honestly, Neil, that's the reason why I believe the work of telling stories along racial lines, and highlighting race and ethnicity, especially in the U.S. context, is so important, because it helps us to understand that race is involved in almost everything, every part of aspect of our society. And you can't talk about sports or entertainment, politics, government, housing, environmental justice without thinking about how race is implicated, and how people experience America differently based on who they are and what they look like.
Absolutely. Eve says sad and shameful. Ken says, I hear you. And that's, if nothing else, that's what, we would want. We want people to hear and understand, and, change, impact their understanding of history, and more importantly, their understanding of the present based on this. My mom shares racism is obviously existing now. It's not just a black and white issue. Think of all the racism I mentioned earlier, the anti-Asian hate, particularly over COVID, has been incredible. But that's also a historic occurrence as well.
Absolutely.
So let's keep moving forward. There are two other pieces I want to be able to get to real quick before we talk to the paper. This is a great discussion with Aaron Morrison. Aaron is the national writer on race and ethnicity for the Associated Press. You can follow him at Aaron L. Morrison on Twitter. Aaron L. Morrison, definitely worth checking out. This next piece is about Louisiana, and from COVID to Ida, Louisiana's marginalized. Um, are show how impacted they are. See no way out is the headline. Um, as you wrote, and in the lead, um, it's nearly a fifth of Louisiana's population, disproportionately represented by black residents and women, live below the poverty line. Um, and this is something I worked with United Way for a number of years, and our United Ways in Louisiana are certainly working on this. They've also worked on a concept called Alice, which is just above poverty line, asset limited, income constrained, but employed as well. So it's a really it's an analytical tool to kind of help focus attention on people who are working but still struggling
Right.
as well. Um, you focused on Louisiana. This
Mhm.
story could have been written in a number of different areas around the country.
Right.
What drew you to Louisiana?
Well, I mean, this was in the wake of Hurricane Ida, as you might remember. The storm wiped out power not just to Louisiana but to large swaths of the Gulf region. And so, I went down there hoping to sort of highlight not just what was happening on the recovery efforts, but how the folks who are most marginalized were faring in the recovery effort. This happened. The hurricane happened, and then Louisiana experienced very, very hot days, close to I think 90, 95 plus degree days in certain cases. I was there for a couple of them, and that meant folks had no air conditioner. And with the humidity of that, if you've ever been to Louisiana, in the summertime, having no AC is that's a no go. That's actually really dangerous, particularly for elderly people. So we went down there, myself and a team of AP writers, to really look at how the recovery was being experienced by different people. And I focused on sort of the work that was being done or not being done in predominantly Black areas of the region, and specifically in and around New Orleans. So the story actually that you're highlighting here features Natasha Blunt. Natasha is, by all accounts, a very talented cook. I mean, folks who've had her cooking would say she could open a restaurant. She could have had a very successful restaurant in Louisiana or some sort of catering business. That's how good she was. But she lost that job, a catering job that she was, working in prior to COVID. And, the stress of losing that job because of the pandemic brought about a lot of stress in her life. She was also caring for two of her grandsons. And so, the stress of that brought on two strokes. She suffered two strokes, and it made her, actually permanently disabled to the point where she could not do some of the work that she had been doing before the pandemic in catering and in the restaurant industry. And so then Hurricane Ida comes and knocks out power to her house, her apartment rather, where she's also behind on her rent because of not working during the pandemic. So the stress of that created, even an even more precarious health situation for her. Her belongings were waterlogged because the storm blew in the upstairs windows in her apartment. So I went there, told her story. And some friends of hers launched a GoFundMe And the GoFundMe was actually pretty successful. It got enough, it raised enough money so that she could pay, her back rent and maybe enough to replace some of the furniture that was damaged in the storm. Well, a few weeks after that, I heard from her friend, Natasha's friend, and she said Natasha suffered her third stroke and passed away.
Oh no.
In November. So, just in that short time, I met her in August, and talked to her. She showed me around her place. Was very gracious, very open. Really a sweetheart. Just such a nurturing woman, and caring in the midst of that, caring for her grandchildren. And to think that this situation, this storm, was the thing that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That I mean, if I'm being honest, it makes me really sad, but it also makes me energized to continue highlighting stories like this, because when we think about climate change, when we think about the hurricanes that are coming more frequently than they have in the past, think about the Natashas out there who literally are one storm away from feeling like they can't go on, feeling like they can't see a way out of a situation, a lot of that situation not really being under their control. So, it sort of steels me for continuing to tell these stories and to really highlight why it is we need to pay attention to how the marginalized are experiencing climate change, because I don't think I'm speaking out of turn or expressing an opinion here. I think it's well founded that the most marginalized, those in poverty, those who cannot afford to evacuate, are going to experience hurricanes and climate change in a way that quite literally threatens their lives, but it also can upend any progress that they make in between storms. Think about experiencing a storm, recovering from that, getting your job back, getting back on your feet, getting caught up on your rent and keeping a roof over your head, and then bam, another
Starting
one
over.
comes, and you're back to square one. And how many storms can those folks withstand before they can no longer withstand them at all?
Absolutely. You mentioned both for this story and for several of the others that you went down with a team of colleagues.
Mhm.
How much of your work is done uh, within the context of a team, looking at a package of articles, various media, etc., and how much is it more of a single, maybe you and a researcher or something working to track down a story?
Right. So, one of the things that I try, well, okay. So, covering racial justice over the last several years, I have made many connections within, the movement space. So often when we see people responding in rapid response to crises like what we're seeing, in the Gulf Coast, or other places, where there are mass tragedies. It's usually the folks on the ground, the grassroots organizations that are responding first, sometimes well before the government gets in and sets up shop and creates a shelter or creates some sort of place to deliver relief. And so I'm saying all that to say, I reached out to the grassroots organizations. I specifically reached out to the organizers that I know in the movement for Black Lives, but then also to organizers I just know from having done various stories on these topics. And I said, hey, I'm headed down to Louisiana. My colleagues and I were headed down to Louisiana. We want to connect with folks who are serving the most needy. Because we know that the folks who can afford to evacuate, they evacuated well before this norm. And the folks who did stay, we know that they can afford generators, and they're generally going to be okay with the lack of power. But it's the other folks that are harder to reach that we relied on the community, the grassroots activists to sort of connect us to those people and make sure that their stories and that narrative was not lost in the coverage.
Sure. Rose shares a story about the impact was powerful in Louisiana, and amazing photos as well that helped tell the story. So again, kudos. I want to sneak in one more article as we're hitting 9:30. We certainly want to make sure we cover the 52 places, if nothing else. But I do want to pick up this piece that you wrote about the Capitol siege, how the evidence of the race war was evident long before the Capitol siege and analysis. This is, of course, a picture of the Mother Emanuel AME Church in South Carolina, where Dylan Roof gunned down several people. This is the lead that I highlighted in my Twitter thread, and we read at the beginning of the show. Just, to me, it was just an incredible piece of writing. You're not pulling any punches with this.
And honestly, Neil, I was surprised that the AP said, "Yeah, go for it." I felt in the wake of the January 6th Capitol riot, there was something that needed to be said. That I heard a lot of pundits saying, on television certainly, but that could be captured in an article in a reported analysis of how we got here. And it's not how we got to the Capitol riot; it's how we got to the place where folks were so animated and whipped up in a frenzy over fear of an election being stolen, or reacting to the fact that people of color turned out and voted in the 2020 election in near historic numbers. That folks in Georgia, when they were having the Senate runoff, civil rights groups, racial justice groups mobilized voters in a way that I think we still need to sort of analyze and really talk about the ground game and what allowed them to surge to victory, to elect Georgia's first African American senator and the first Jewish senator from Georgia.
Yeah.
All of that happened just before the Capitol riot. So, I wanted to find a way to take all of that and point to other historical markers that showed that when there has been advancement in racial justice and racial progress, as our country has diversified, there has been pushback and a backlash, and sometimes that backlash has been violent, very violent, in fact, and deadly.
So here's an image of the Capitol riot. I wanted to push on that a little bit, or probe a little bit, that idea of whenever there has been progress, there's been pushback from I want to be careful with the way I phrase it. It's not all whites, certainly. Certainly people who are on more the white supremacist side, but people who are worried about their status in society and can't stand that idea of losing power. To me, that's a given. That's a known fact. It's understood as part of our history.
Mm-hmm.
Are you feeling, is your approach to this and your focus on it? It's a story that needs to be told, a story that people are not understanding at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that the reason why we struggle to get people to believe the premise of a piece like this, or to understand that the Capitol siege is really connected to this long-standing battle for who gets to define and who gets to decide in America. That's, because we have disagreement about these things. I think it really hinders our, our ability to move as forward as we would like to move on these issues. If you can have, the Charleston church massacre take place, if you can have the Charlottesville rally take place,
Yeah.
and for there not to be immediate across the board condemnation of the racist, anti-Semitic, that sort of strain within those crowds. Again, you said it's not all white people. I truly believe that as well. That, but the fact that there isn't broad condemnation is really, and there's debate about whether or not there's any redeeming, quality to the folks who
Yes.
stormed the Capitol, folks who
Bad people on
participated in
both
the rally.
sides.
Yeah, the fact that we are having that debate, I think that's part of why we continue to to see the vision in our politics.
Sure.
If we all just woke up one day and decided, like, the Capitol riot is not okay, the Charlottesville rally is not okay, the Charleston church massacre is not okay. I think on that one we pretty much do have broad agreement on that. But Dylan Roof has fans, so you know what I mean. Like, we're still at a place where it's hard to know how far we go if when we reach these moments we still fall into the trap of pointing the finger the other way.
No question. There should be broad condemnation. Ellen Austin says this is disgraceful. I think with the Capitol riot, we have a little bit more work to do because we need to actually convince some people that it happened, that they weren't just tourists walking through the halls of the Capitol. I think it's harder to dismiss something like the Charleston church shooting and or Charlottesville. But as I've said on the show, my neighbor is a member of the Capitol Hill Police Corps, police patrol, and it happened, and it was incredible to watch and experience and to talk to him afterwards. He obviously hasn't said much about it, but just to know that he's on the same, he's on bike patrol with Brian Sicknick, who was the first person who succumbed to his injuries, who died just after the event. Absolutely incredible. Mary Curtis has a interesting question. She's asking, in your reporting, how do you handle resistance and pushback from officials and readers who disagree? And also, can you talk about self-care for those who report on race? We talk about people will talk about self-care when they're doing stories in a around violence in a war-torn area, even around disasters, the mental health. When I worked with United Way, self-care for folks working in the nonprofit world was really important because you're working with people the whole time. But when you're doing stories like this, what about self-care for your own your own mental health when you're digging into these kind of issues? And she's saying this from a perspective of someone who knew victims of the Charleston church shooting.
Right.
Speak to that, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, well, first, dealing with the resistance and pushback from either officials or readers. I mean, I sometimes it ranges from silence or non-acknowledgement that you even put the work out there, to very threatening emails in your inbox or direct messages and on Twitter, sort of challenging you with on the grounds that America has come far enough that while we can point to these incidences as very tragic and shocking things, the vast majority of people of color in this country, have rights and are, able to enjoy their lives and live in peace. But the fact of the matter is that sort of collapses the experiences of so many people, the varied experiences of, we know for a fact that people don't experience America the same because of who they are and what they look like. On the question of self-care, I would just say that, I do my best to keep in mind that I can't cover it all. I can't get at every story. There are going to be some things that I just have to decide, what, I'm not going to do this one. It's and being okay with allowing yourself, giving yourself the permission to be okay with missing some of the stories. The other thing is, if I keep at this and this stuff is, it has the effect of being traumatic for the journalists to hear these stories, to listen to people recount trauma. It takes a toll on you. But I always say to myself, well, Aaron, like, you're no good to yourself. You're no good to the AP. You're no good to readers if you're not okay. You can't do your work if you're not able to take a break, take a pause, breathe for a second, and really remember that as much as this work can help to bring about change and to change the way people think about a lot of these underlying issues, we also want to make sure we're not burning the candle on both ends, as my mother always reminds me not to do. So,
Sure.
It's important to take breaks and to remember that if you don't come to this work well, you're not going to do the work well.
Sure. That's definitely good advice for writers and others working in areas of trauma. I wanted to just highlight for folks that all of these articles that we just reviewed are on our website for the show. The interview with Nicole Hanna Jones, the Tulsa Massacre, Louisiana, etc. So check out our website for the show. For these pieces, I want to turn our attention at 9:43. I think this is the latest we've gone before turning to the paper. But Aaron, that's a testament to the incredible work that you've done and the importance of sticking with some of those stories. We want to look at the 52 places in the paper today, the print edition, special section. There's a 52 places for a changed world. There's a link to the PDF of the story if you want to check that out. And there are also links to our previous shows, 52 Places to Love from 2021 and 52 Places to Go with Amy Vershup and Seb Modak. So we'll want to check that out. There were a few questions that came up that I don't know that we're going to have time for. But if you have a chance to go back into the Facebook group and Facebook page and answer them, Rose was asking about AP sending teams out to cover stories, what that means in terms of local reporting. And Carla asked a question about after the George Floyd murder, are we slipping back into old patterns or was it a turning point? And Patricia Freudenberg loved your point that we can't do it all ourselves. So with that, I want to bring up the newspaper and go take a look at that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, focus on the 52 places. I'll try and do a quick a look at the front page section so that we can give it a little bit due, but we'll certainly take a look at the New York Times 52 places section in depth. So with this front page section, we have let's see real quickly the Insider piece. This is again one of those stories we may not have time to, as much as we'd love to add another hour to the show, but the Times Insider piece is inviting the 70 plus crowd to bear it all. This is about the New York Times Magazine story about sex after 70. So you'll definitely want to check that out. The international story, towers rise over London's Brick Lane, clouding its future, a home to the Bangladeshi community in London. We have pay your power bill, Myanmar residents are told, or pay with your life. Soldiers deployed as debt collectors. So that is interesting. On a Tuscan island, lives entwined forever by a harbor disaster. And the bottom left, far right French leader tries to project credibility. We have horror in board games, recalling a wartime childhood, Lebanon memory dispatch. This is an interesting piece. And I think these were our journalists who grew up in Lebanon during the Civil War. Colleges regroup as another semester begins in COVID's shadow. A lot of schools delayed opening, delayed having kids come back to campus because of Omicron. And then this is the enterprise story, and starts on the front page. Decades of discoveries before miraculous, in quotes, sprint to a vaccine. Decades of discoveries before sprint to vaccine. HIV failures, a wily virus, a pipe dream. And the bottom, we'll just fold this up here, actually shows a picture of Dr. Fauci briefing President Clinton on AIDS back in 1996. I think there's also some controversy over his work on HIV/AIDS at the time.
Right.
COVID breakthrough in long buried science, a continuation of that piece. It goes 2 pages over here with a half-page ad at the bottom. And certainly, as everyone knows, we are not giving enough attention to the front section this week, but sometimes that's what happens. This is another piece about in a Brooklyn COVID ward, 2 nurses race to their 36 patients. It's a series of articles the Times has done on how COVID has, how people have fared in hospitals, in-depth looks at staffing issues and treatment. And so then a few other stories here. This got buried because of the timing. It was resolved late, but this is the hostage situation in Dallas yesterday at a synagogue, talking about anti-Semitism, talking about what should be condemned. This was an incredible story to watch unfold. What's kind of as a corollary to that, and looking at local politics here in Virginia, Governor Glenn Youngkin took office yesterday, and two of his executive orders in his batch of promises that he said he would put out the first day. One is to ban the teaching of critical race theory, and 2 is to set up a commission to study anti-Semitism in Virginia. So that these 2 opposite approaches. We can't talk about how race impacts everything we talked about today in terms of the 1619 Project, the Tulsa Massacre, and how that might impact today. It would be covered, and the whole debate over critical race theory. We had a long discussion of that with Walter and Kay back in November. Certainly a lot of confusion around that, a lot of just red herrings, but still just the basic idea is that some people just don't want us talking about race and how it impacts people's lives.
Absolutely.
So the piece I want to really focus on as we approach the 10-minute mark for the show, the 52 Places for a Changed World. This is the print edition. It's a nice tabloid, as you can see, almost similar to the book review. It's another special print section. That 2-page spread, we selected spots from across the globe where travelers can be part of the solution. They've also highlighted, where there are some special efforts are being made around climate change, the environment, etc. So this is the piece by Amy Verschup to introduce this package. Our annual list of destinations to visit look at spots where visitors can be part of the solution to problems like over tourism and climate change. Um, and again, the PDF of this whole section is on our website, thanks to Wayne Camadoy. Thank you again, Wayne, for sending that to us. The online version is also really great. I love what the Times can do with their online coverage. Um, Sometimes the print is just also really impressive to look at. This is Italy and Mozambique. This new park is in a struggling country, offers ancient rock paintings and a refuge for local animal species. Um, and here near Venice, outside Venice, a town with history and architectural delights is an alternative to crowded tourist sites.
Right.
Now, Queens, the home cooking of all the world, a la carte and available at the price of a subway ride. Um, this is one of the places you've been to on this list, correct?
That is right. So, you know, Queens is actually, I live in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, but I used to live in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and Queens. Queens is right there, and so often, if a friend and I wanted to have something unusual than what was in the neighborhood. Queens really was some of the best food, and also some of the most economical when it came to staying on budget. So I certainly love Queens, certainly love eating there, but also experiencing the cultures and seeing just how many cultures call that borough home.
Sure, and that's it's well known. My parents are from India. I was born in New York, but the Indian community really found its first roots in Queens and later moved to Edison, New Jersey, of course, around the country as well. But Jackson Heights, in particular, very well known for its Indian food. Wayne is letting us know that the design for 52 Places was by Mary Jane Callister. So give a shout out to Mary Jane for this great layout um, as you go through. And then you have the occasional full spread, a great photograph there. This is for Cobscook Shores in Maine. A new park for nature lovers conserves a rugged coast and eases crowds in other areas,
Mm.
which is really interesting. Here in Alaska, a community largely indigenous embraces sustainable tourism and finds a way to deal with cruise crowds. We did my wife and I did our honeymoon on a cruise to Alaska,
Oh, wow.
and certainly when it was a 7-day cruise up and back from Vancouver, and you certainly see like these towns just blow up during cruise season. You see these huge cruise ships in the harbor in somewhere like Skagway, which is like a small town otherwise. So this is in India. A tourism initiative empowers local women in northern India and gives travelers an intimate introduction to life in remote villages. So here is the 52 places list. We won't have time to cover all of the destinations that they highlight, but I want to give you a sense of what the section looks like. And again, a shout out to Mary Jane Callister for her work on this, and to the full travel team. They've been through a lot in terms of when they went from when COVID shut everything down and they
Hmm.
stopped the travel section and had a at-home section for a while. And then going back to when they stopped the at-home section last summer, when we thought that we were coming out of this,
Right.
and obviously that wasn't the case. So this
I
is
think this is really, really a nice idea, especially because the number of people I know who, when as soon as it seemed safe to get out and vacation again, the number of people who flooded Tulum, I was like, that can't be good for Tulum and the natural resources there. So I think this is actually a really great idea to highlight places where people could go and relieve the crowding on places that so many people have flocked to in the last year or two or more.
here from Marrakesh. So we talked about this. You've been to Morocco.
Yes.
Visiting a fabled city supports efforts to employ, educate, and empower women. That's this piece on the right-hand side.
Right.
My wife spent a summer in Fez as well. And we lived in Egypt for 2 years. But this is another gorgeous photograph, the Seguro National Park. Communal help for a species threatened by climate change. It may sustain a park for the future in Arizona.
Right.
Great, great photography as we approach the end of the 52 places. And they include Bronzeville, Milwaukee, with thriving businesses and the reopening of a noted museum. A largely Black district offers the chance to take part in renewal. That's interesting. It wouldn't necessarily make most travel lists, right? That's a unique feature. And then Daintree rainforest in Australia, a region returned to its indigenous owners, lets visitors learn about their culture and stewardship of the land. On the right-hand side. So that is the 52 places for a changed world, special in this week's edition of the New York Times. You can find it online, and you can also see previous shows that we've done that covered the 52 places list. So with that, Aaron, thank you very much. Wanted to make sure folks know that next week, David K. Johnston will be joining us. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning investigative reporter and founder of DC Report. He was at the Times for a number of years. He's been writing about Donald Trump for almost 30 years. He has a new book out called The Big Cheat. So we look forward to having him on the show. Aaron, if you have a few more minutes, what I'd like to do is to make a few quick announcements.
Sure.
And then bring you back on for a final word, and then also to share a pro tip with our viewers from your experience writing. There's a lot that we didn't get to cover, of course. You taught a class at CUNY. We mentioned that in the thread, the IDB Wells Society. So this shouldn't be too hard in terms of advice you would give young writers. You did that for a whole semester last year, right?
That's right.
So if you hang out if you can bear with us for just a few minutes, we'll bring you back on in just a moment. Again, my name is Neil Parekh, and this has been an incredible show with Aaron Morrison, national writer on race and ethnicity for the Associated Press. I want to make sure to thank our production team again, Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, and Carla Baranakis. And whenever we talk about Carla, we also want to make sure that we highlight the Local Connection newsletter. The Local Connection newsletter is a great piece that she puts out. You can find it at bit.ly/local news tips, bit.ly/local news tips. It's put out by the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University. And each week they offer story ideas and pro tips for journalists. Best of all, it's free. So definitely subscribe. And I'm certain there are a lot of tips that should be able to work on with you, Aaron. I know she knows you from your time at the Bergen Record. So if you haven't made it into Local Connection yet, I'm sure tips on covering race and ethnicity in local papers would be welcome for sure. And I want to also give a shout out to our friend Stefan Kaplan. He has a show coming up. He's restarting the Spin It Social Hour on January 19th with a focus on talking social media for social good. His guest, 7 p.m. on Wednesday, is going to be Tim McDonald, a friend of the show, a friend of ours, who is a stage 4 colon cancer thriver, not just a survivor. So you can catch it on the Spin It Social Hour. Tim, so thrilled that you're doing well, and we'll look forward to hearing more of your story on Wednesday evening. As I mentioned, next week, Sri is going to be back in the chair, and he'll be interviewing David K. Johnston. You can follow him at David K. J. As I mentioned, David has a new book out, The Big Cheat, about how Donald Trump fleeced America, enriched himself and his family. So you'll definitely want to check that out. With that, we'll bring back Aaron for some final thoughts. Aaron, over to you.
Well, I mean, first, I just want to say thank you for having me and engaging me in this conversation. And whenever I get a chance to talk to people about the work that I do, for me, I always turn to the why, and the why of it is that I want to see and leave this place better than I found it, especially better for the children that I hope to have one day. And journalism is just one vehicle for doing that. I believe there are many different ways to make a difference. But it's really fulfilling for me to work for a place like AP where you're putting the sort of undercovered narratives out there, but you're also bringing facts to bear and putting facts first in the presentation of those narratives. And so especially for a place like the AP, which is global, when I'm writing an article and I put it out there, I know that a lot of people are going to see it, and I have to pay extra care to making sure that I'm putting out what will inform people to help bring context and nuance to a particular issue. And so that's something that I tell that I've told my students is that, it's certainly great that we are covering race and ethnicity as a fixture of the press, of media. But it's even more important that we are just doing that in a way that brings the proper context and nuance so that people make, not only informed decisions for themselves and for their families, but they're also making decisions that will help improve the lives of others, people who are not like them. I find that that's really, a rewarding part of what I do is to help other people who are not like me understand what it's like to be in my shoes, what it's like to be in the, Black in America or Latinx in America or Asian in America. So important that as you go out there and you tell people stories, really uplift those with the lived experience, and don't tokenize them, but certainly give the mic to folks who aren't often heard or aren't heard enough in our media.
Thank you very much, Aaron. That was great. Before I let you go, I want to let you know how much your presence here today and what you shared was appreciated. Stephen Kaplan, thank you for all the great work you do. Another powerful New York Times read along. Our friend Mary Curtis, thank you both so much for a great conversation. If you don't know Mary, I certainly would like to make introductions after the show. She's certainly someone you can connect with. Carla, again, thank you. You've given us a lot to think about. And again, thank you, Carla, for bringing Aaron to us and we didn't talk about it explicitly. I think that, maybe mention it once or twice. Of course, tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day. And it's, this is what we should be talking about every day, not just on this weekend.
Absolutely.
Naomi, wonderful show. And Ellen says, terrific show, so important. Thank you for not talking about that tennis player. We'll leave the Joker unnamed. He really is. You can just call him a Joker at this point.
Hey, just tell him to have a safe flight.
Right. Exactly. Well, let's hope he finally leaves. Jonathan says, great show. Deborah tuned in late from Fort Lauderdale, but Deborah and anyone else who may have joined us late or joined in the middle, as soon as the show is over, maybe a few minutes on Facebook, but on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and on our website, you'll be able to watch it right from the beginning to catch what you missed. Certainly worth watching the whole show. Doug Levy, thank you for another interesting program. Patricia Freudenberg, thank you, Aaron, and the entire production team. Thank you, Patricia. And Mattel just announced an Ida B. Wells Barbie doll commemorating MLK Day. I remember seeing that online, and it had, if I remember correctly, it was holding a copy of the paper. Is it the
Yes.
Memphis Record, or if I remember that correctly?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Her great granddaughter Michelle Duster worked with Mattel on bringing that making that Barbie happen. So it's really amazing to see.
Wow.
Ida B. Wells, someone that I idolize, being honored in that way. It's just fantastic.
It certainly, is a new look and a different approach for Barbie, which for many years was synonymous for that which is unreal and unattainable.
Right.
To do something like this, I know they also have. We tried getting it over the holidays. They actually have a Barbie doll with Indian clothes and an Indian man and woman in a sari, etc.
Mhm.
So it's interesting that that's a whole conversation where Barbie is going with the products they're putting out. My mom says, thank you, Aaron, for writing on ethnicity and race. We need so many Aarons to cover so many stories. I think that's a good point.
Thank you very
And
much.
Stefan, thanks us for the shout out for the show. Tim McDonald is going to be his guest. Tim was watching. I didn't realize that. Tim, thank you so much. And you're right off of chemo. So so glad to see your progress. I can't remember when it was Tim got the diagnosis, whether it was the beginning of the year or earlier, but to see that evolution is certainly heartwarming.
God bless.
Wayne Camadoy, your work and other reporters covering race is important at this time. Wayne, of course, works at the New York Times on the design team there and is a great friend of the show. So thank you, Wayne, as well. Naomi says your words were inspiring, and Miriam Berkeley. I mean, this keeps going. This is partly why the show's going long, Aaron. All these kudos you're getting. Thank
I'm
you.
so
I
delighted.
assume you're not going to rush to get off the show with this, right?
No. And I will take your advice. I'm gonna after we end, I'll go on and answer any questions that didn't get to.
If you can, that would be great. And who else did I miss? Naomi offered a well said earlier, and Cherie says thank you as well from Beverly Hills. So with that, we're going to thank everyone for joining us. It's a little bit after 10 o'clock Eastern time. We do try and end these shows as close to 10 as possible so that we can all get on with our days and with our family. But we do appreciate everyone spending their Sunday morning with us. We've been producing this show for 6 years. Sri has been doing it for 6 years. I've been working with him for 4 years to produce the show and to guest host as necessary. And we know that you have other things you can do with your Sunday morning. We always appreciate our guests taking their time, but also for our viewers, we really appreciate everyone coming back and spending this time and being engaged in the conversation, sharing your comments, sharing your praise, bring him back. Aaron, we already have a request to have you on the show.
Hey, just
again.
let me know, and I'll put it on the calendar.
Absolutely. Maybe if you're working on a enterprise story, maybe we can time it with that next time.
Okay.
And Rose says thank you, and Mary appreciates the shout out as well. You can follow her at mcurtis nc3 mcurtisnc3 on Twitter. With that, thank you. And Aaron, thank you for the great work you're doing. Look forward and keeping up with
Thank
all
you.
of your writing.
Thank you so much. Have a
Bye
good
bye.